Everyone mocked the plus-size black woman, until the Korean billionaire chose her. The deafening roar of the explosion ripped through the penthouse, shaking the reinforced steel walls of the panic room. Amara screamed, her hands flying to her ears as a shockwave rattled her bones. Through the small glass viewport, she watched in horror as smoke billowed to the corridor, obscuring her view of Jae-hyun. She pounded her fist against the cold metal door. Jae-hyun, Jae-hyun, can you hear me? Silence. Then the sharp, rhythmic sound of suppressed gunfire. 3 shots. 4. A heavy thud of a body hitting marble. Amara pressed her face against the glass, her breath fogging the pain. She could just make out a silhouette through the smoke, moving with lethal precision, the black orchid fully unleashed. 2 more men appeared at the end of the corridor. Jae-hyun dispatched them without hesitation, his tailored suit splattered with shadows that could only be blood. Then silence again. The smoke began to settle. Jae-hyun stood alone, his chest heaving, his weapon still raised. He turned slowly toward the panic room. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass. His were not the eyes of a billionaire. They were the eyes of a predator who had just defended his territory. The orchid tattoo on his neck seemed darker now, stained by the violence he had just committed. He walked to the door and punched in the override code. The locks disengaged with a hiss. Amara stumbled backward as the door swung open. She was shaking uncontrollably. "Are you hurt?" Jae-hyun asked, his voice hoarse but steady. "Am I hurt?" Amara's voice rose in disbelief. "You just killed people. In your home, while I watched. They were not people. They were assassins sent by the Ondo Syndicate. They wanted to use you as leverage against me." He holstered his weapon, his movements mechanical. "I will not apologize for protecting what is mine." There it is again. Amara spat, fury overriding her terror. "What is yours? I am not yours, Jae-hyun. I am not a possession. And I am not a pawn in whatever war you are fighting." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in confined space. "You have been on my radar for 3 years. Amara, do you understand? 3 years. I have protected you from shadows you did not even know existed. I have eliminated threats before they reached your doorstep. So do not tell me you are not mine. You have been mine since the moment you walked past that bookstore in Lagos and saw something you were never supposed to see." Amara's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Jae-hyun's jaw tightened. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a photograph. It was old, creased, showing a young woman with kind eyes standing in front of a black car, his mother, and in the background, barely visible, was a teenage Amara, frozen mid-step, her face turned toward the camera. "You saw her being taken," Jae-hyun said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You were 16 years old, walking home from school. You saw 2 men force my mother into that car. You ran, but they saw you too." Amara's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of a steel shelf to steady herself. "I always thought it was a nightmare. I never knew if it was real. It was real, and the men who took her were from the Ondo Syndicate, the same people who just tried to breach my home. They have been looking for you ever since. Amara, you are the only living witness to my mother's disappearance. That is why I have been watching you. That is why I brought you here." Amara stared at him, her mind reeling. "So your obsession, the way you look at me, the way you touch me, that was all just surveillance?" Jae-hyun's mask cracked. His hand reached out, fingers brushing her cheek with devastating tenderness. It started as protection, but somewhere along the way, it became something else, something I cannot control. "You locked me in a cage," Amara whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How is that love?" "It is the only love I know," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I have never loved anything without crushing it. My mother, my father, my empire. I do not know how to be gentle, Amara, but for you I am trying." She pulled away from his touch. Trying is not enough. 2 days passed in suffocating silence. The penthouse was restored to its pristine state, the bodies removed, the blood scrubbed away as if the attack had never happened. But Amara could not unsee what she had witnessed. She could not forget the cold efficiency with which Jae-hyun had ended lives. And she could not ignore the file that still sat in his study, The file that proved her entire relationship with the Adeyemi family was built on a foundation of secrets and lies. She threw herself into her work with Hannah, clinging to the one pure thing in this gilded nightmare. Hannah had sensed the shift immediately. She signed questions that Amara could not answer. "You are sad. Did my father hurt you?" Amara shook her head, forcing a smile. "Your father is complicated." Hannah's eyes darkened with understanding. "He is broken, but he loves you. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Sometimes love is not enough." Amara signed back, her hands trembling. Later that night, Amara sat alone in her suite, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. The city of Seoul glittered below her, a million lights that felt impossibly distant. She had made her decision. She had to leave, not because she did not love Jae-hyun, but because she did. If she stayed, she would always be his greatest vulnerability, the witness that the Ondo syndicate would kill to silence. By leaving, she could protect him, and she could protect Hannah, who had already lost one mother figure and could not bear to lose another to violence. Amara packed a single bag. She left behind the emerald gown, the expensive jewelry, every gift he had silently placed in her room. She took only her cello and the photograph of his mother, the one that connected their fates. She slipped out of the penthouse at 3 a.m, using the service elevator that the staff had shown her weeks ago. The cold night air hit her face, and for a moment she felt relief. Freedom. Then a hand closed around her wrist. Amara spun around, her heart lurching. Jae-hyun stood in the shadows of the service entrance, dressed in a black coat, his breath misting in the cold. He looked exhausted. He looked shattered. "Did you think I would not notice?" he asked, his voice raw. "Did you think I would let you walk away?" "Let me go, Jae-hyun," Amara pleaded, pulling against his grip. "I am doing this for you. I am a witness. As long as I am here, the Ondo syndicate will never stop coming. They will hurt Hannah. They will hurt you. I cannot live with that." "I do not care about the Ondo syndicate," he growled, pulling her closer. "I will dismantle them piece by piece. I will burn their empire to ash. But I cannot lose you. Amara, please. You are the only light I have ever known." "You locked me in a cage," she repeated, her voice breaking. "You lied to me for 3 years. You made me fall in love with a man who was watching me like a target. And I hate myself for it," he confessed, his grip loosening, his hands falling to his sides. "I hate that I do not know how to be soft. I hate that my first instinct is always control. But I am standing here in the cold, begging you. Is that not proof that you have changed me?" Amara looked at him, truly looked at him. The most powerful man in Seoul, the Black Orchid, the predator who forgave nothing, was standing before her with tears in his eyes. She wanted to stay. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to fall into his arms. But the memory of the gunfire echoed in her mind. "I need time," she whispered. "I need to remember who I am outside of your walls." Jae-hyun closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. "Then I will wait. I will dismantle the Ondo syndicate. I will make this world safe for you. And when you are ready, I will be here." He stepped back, releasing her. The distance between them felt like an ocean. Amara turned and walked into the night, her cello case heavy on her back. She did not look back. If she had, she would have seen Jae-hyun sink to his knees on the cold pavement, the orchid tattoo on his neck catching the moonlight as he bowed his head in grief. Weeks passed. Amara returned to her old life in Insadong, renting a tiny apartment above the antiquarian bookstore. She resumed her work, cataloging books and teaching music to children who did not care about her size or her past. She tried to forget the penthouse. She tried to forget Hannah's smile. She tried to forget the way Jae-hyun's touch had made her feel like the most precious thing in the world. But forgetting was impossible. Every night, she dreamed of him. Every morning, she checked the news, searching for any mention of the Adeyemi Empire. The headlines were brutal. In the weeks since she had left, Jae-hyun had waged a silent war against the Ondo syndicate. Their operations in Lagos crumbled. Their leaders in Seoul were arrested under mysterious circumstances. The Black Orchid was systematically destroying his enemies, and the world watched in awe and terror. Amara knew he was doing it for her. He was keeping his promise. One evening, as she closed the bookstore, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Hannah stood there, dressed in a simple coat, her eyes red from crying. She looked thinner. She looked lost. Amara rushed to her, signing frantically. "What are you doing here? Is your father with you? Are you safe?" Hannah's hands moved slowly, painfully. "He is dying." Amara's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "He does not sleep. He does not eat. He has destroyed the Ando Syndicate, but he is destroying himself too. He thinks he does not deserve you. He thinks he is a monster. But I know the truth. He is only a monster because he has never known love. You taught him, and now he is forgetting." Amara pulled Hannah into a tight embrace, her own tears soaking the girl's shoulder. She thought she had left to protect them. Instead, she had broken them completely. "Take me to him," Amara signed, pulling back. "Take me home." The penthouse was dark when they arrived. The grand halls that once gleamed with cold elegance now felt like a tomb. The staff had been dismissed. The curtains were drawn. Only the distant sound of rain against the windows broke the silence. Amara found Jae-hyun in the sunroom, the room where she used to play her cello. He was sitting in a leather armchair, staring at the empty space where her instrument once stood. He looked gaunt. His tailored suit hung loosely on his frame. The orchid tattoo on his neck seemed faded, as if even his ink was grieving. He did not look up when she entered. "Hannah should not have brought you here," he said, his voice hollow. "This is not your burden." Amara knelt before him, taking his cold hands in hers. "Look at me." Slowly, painfully, he raised his eyes. The fire that once burned was extinguished. She saw only exhaustion, grief, and a desperate, terrified hope. "I am sorry," she said, her voice steady. "I thought I was protecting you by leaving, but I was wrong. Love is not about running from the danger. It is about facing it together." "I am a monster, Amara," he whispered. "I have done terrible things. I have killed. I have manipulated. I have controlled. You deserve someone who is not broken." "You are broken," she agreed, reaching up to touch the tattoo on his neck. "But so am I. I have been mocked my entire life for taking up too much space. I have been invisible, overlooked, dismissed. But when I am with you, I feel seen. You do not just love me. You choose me. Every single day, in every single way. You choose me." Jae-hyun's composure shattered. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, his body shaking with silent sobs. "I thought I had lost you forever." "You will never lose me," she murmured against his chest. "But you have to learn to trust me. No more cages. No more secrets. We face the darkness together, or not at all." "I promise," he breathed. "I promise you. Amara, no more cages." They held each other as the rain intensified outside, the storm mirroring the catharsis within. For the first time in his life, Jae-hyun Adeyemi was not the black orchid. He was simply a man, broken and healed by the love of a woman who refused to be invisible. The emotional intimacy of that night was sacred. It existed in quiet whispers, in gentle touches, in the slow, deliberate rebuilding of trust. When he finally kissed her, it was not a demand. It was a question, and when she answered, it was with her whole heart. The city of Seoul woke to a different world. 3 months later, the Ando Syndicate was officially dissolved. Jae-hyun had kept his promise, dismantling the organization from within, using evidence that exonerated Amara as a witness. She was no longer a target. She was free, but freedom meant nothing without love. The press conference was held at the Grand Hyatt, the same hotel where Jae-hyun had publicly defended Amara months ago. Reporters from Seoul, Lagos, and international outlets packed the ballroom, sensing that they were about to witness history. Jae-hyun took the stage in a perfectly tailored black suit, the orchid tattoo on his wrist visible as he adjusted the microphone. He looked healthy again, restored by 3 months of healing and the quiet, steady love of the woman who now stood in the wings. "I have called this conference for one reason," he began, his voice calm but resonant. "For years, the world has known me as the Black Orchid, a businessman, a syndicate leader, a man who forgave nothing and loved no one. That man is dead." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jae-hyun continued, his eyes finding Amara in the shadows. I was raised to believe that love was a liability. That trust was a weakness. I built an empire on fear because I was afraid of my own heart. Then I met a woman who showed me that true strength is not in control. It is in surrender. He extended his hand toward the wings. Amara Okoye, please come here. Amara's heart pounded. This was not part of the plan. But she stepped forward, walking to the stunned crowd, her emerald dress flowing around her curves like liquid courage. The same journalist who had once mocked her size now stared in reverent silence. She took his hand. He knelt before her, and the entire ballroom gasped. Amara, he said, loud enough for the cameras to capture every word. You entered my world when I was drowning in darkness. You showed kindness to my daughter when everyone else treated her as invisible. You saw the monster in me, and you did not run. You stayed. You fought. You loved. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring that shimmered with a black diamond, the stone cut in the shape of an orchid. I am done hiding. I am done controlling. I am standing here, before the world, to declare that I am yours. Every part of me, the billionaire, the syndicate heir, the broken man, they are all yours. Amara Okoye, will you marry me? Tears streamed down Amara's cheeks. The silence in the room was absolute. The same high society that had mocked her, the same elites who had whispered cruel words about her body, were now witnessing the most powerful man in Seoul kneel before her. Yes, she whispered. Then louder for the world to hear. Yes, Jae-hyun, I will marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and rose, pulling her into a kiss that was both reverent and possessive. The cameras flashed like lightning. The ballroom erupted in applause. But Amara heard none of it. She only felt his arms around her, solid and real and finally, completely hers. 1 year later, the wedding was held in Lagos, on a private beach where the Atlantic Ocean met the golden sand in endless, rhythmic devotion. It was a blend of Korean tradition and Nigerian celebration, a vibrant, joyful fusion of the two cultures that Jae-hyun carried in his blood. Hannah stood as Amara's maid of honor, her hands moving in a beautiful, silent speech that made everyone cry. Jae-hyun watched his daughter with tears in his eyes, the orchid tattoo on his chest visible beneath the open collar of his white linen shirt. He was no longer the cold, untouchable billionaire. He was a husband, a father, a man who had learned to love without cages. As the sun set over the ocean, Amara danced in her husband's arms, her white dress flowing around her abundant curves like sea foam. She was still plus-sized. She was still a black woman, in a world that often demanded she shrink. But in Jae-hyun's eyes, she was the entire universe. You saved me, he murmured against her ear, his arms wrapped possessively around her waist. You walked into my world, and you rewrote everything. You saved yourself, she replied, looking up at him with endless, patient love. I just reminded you that you were worth saving. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. I love you, Amara Adeyemi. I love you too, Jae-hyun. The waves crashed against the shore, eternal and steady. The stars emerged one by one, painting the Nigerian sky in silver light. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of cello music drifted on the warm breeze, a melody of two broken souls who had found their harmony. 6 months later, Amara stood in the sunroom of the penthouse, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. She was pregnant. The news had brought Jae-hyun to his knees for the second time in his life, tears of joy streaming down his face as he pressed his lips to her stomach. Hannah was already practicing her sign language lullabies, her eyes bright with excitement at the thought of a sibling. The penthouse, once a cold mausoleum of marble and silence, now echoed with laughter, music, and the chaotic beauty of a family. Jae-hyun had kept his promise. The cages were gone. The secrets were buried. What remained was a love that had been forged in fire and tempered by forgiveness. He came up behind her now, wrapping his arms around her, his hands covering hers on the swell of their unborn child. His lips brushed her neck, right where her pulse beat steady and strong. Thank you, he whispered. For what? She asked, leaning into his warmth. For being impossible to ignore. Amara laughed, the sound bright and free. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had once been a black orchid, the predator who forgave nothing. Now his eyes held only love, only devotion, only the quiet, fierce promise of forever. "I will always see you," she said, "and I will always choose you." Outside, the city of Seoul glittered beneath a canopy of stars. Inside, two hearts beat as one. The story that began with judgment and silence had ended with the loudest, most defiant declaration imaginable. Love had won. The steel door shuddered from another impact. Amara pressed her palms flat against the cold metal, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Through the reinforced glass, she watched Jae-hyun raise his weapon, his silhouette a dark promise against the smoke-filled corridor. The orchid tattoo on his wrist flexed as he fired 3 precise shots. A body fell, then another. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Jae-hyun turned toward the panic room. His eyes found hers through the viewport. They were not the eyes of a businessman. They were the eyes of a predator who had just killed for her. He punched in the override code with blood-stained fingers. The locks disengaged. Amara stumbled backward as the door hissed open. The scent of gunpowder and copper filled her lungs. "You are unharmed," Jae-hyun stated. It was not a question. He stepped inside, his height overwhelming in the confined space. His suit spattered with darkness that could only be blood. "Who are they?" Amara whispered. "The Ondo Syndicate," he said, holstering his weapon. "Rivals from Lagos. They discovered you are the witness. They came to take you." The word witness hung between them like a blade. Amara remembered the file she had dropped, the photographs, her father's name highlighted in red. "You knew," she accused, her voice trembling. "You have known since Lagos. The tutoring job, the penthouse. It was never about Hannah. It was about keeping the witness close." Jae-hyun's jaw tightened. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, afraid to touch her. At first, she laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You manipulated me. You watched me for years. Is this even real?" He closed the distance. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she did not realize she was shedding. The orchid tattoo on his neck pulsed with his rapid heartbeat. "I brought you here to protect you from them. But I kept you here because I am drowning in you. Amara, I breathe you. I dream you. This obsession is the only true thing I have ever known." She pushed against his chest, but he did not budge. "You locked me in a cage." "I locked you in safety," he corrected, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The world outside this room wants you dead. My world, the syndicate my father built, the enemies I inherited. They will use you to destroy me, or they will kill you simply to hurt me." "Then let me go," she pleaded. "If I am the danger, release me." "I cannot," he confessed, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. "I am not capable of it. You are the only warmth in 20 years of winter. Without you, I return to the dark." The next morning, the penthouse was scrubbed clean. The bodies were gone. The marble was polished. But the atmosphere had shifted into something sharp and volatile. Amara sat in the library with Hannah, but her hands shook too badly to sign properly. Hannah noticed, her dark eyes, so like her father's, filled with worry. "You are leaving," Hannah signed. Amara hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I have to. I bring danger to your father. To you. He will break." Hannah signed, her movements frantic. "You are the only one who knows how to hold him." "He needs to learn to hold himself," Amara replied. That afternoon, Amara made her decision. She packed a single bag. She left the emerald gowns, the jewelry, the life he had constructed for her. She took only her cello and the photograph of his mother. If the Ondo Syndicate wanted a witness, they would find her alone. Not here. Not where Hannah could become collateral damage. She wrote a note. 5 words only. "I am protecting you both." She slipped out through the service entrance at dusk. The rain had returned, turning Seoul into a blurred watercolor of neon and shadow. She did not see the black sedan that followed her taxi across the city. She did not see the men watching her rented apartment from a rooftop across the street. 3 days passed in isolation. Amara stayed in a tiny studio in Itaewon, above a noisy karaoke bar. She told herself she was free, but the silence felt wrong. The absence of his presence felt like a missing limb. On the fourth night, the power cut out. Amara sat up in bed, her heart hammering. She heard the door lock click, the sound of a silencer being screwed onto a barrel. Shadows moved in the hallway. She reached for her phone, but the signal was dead. They had jammed it. The door exploded inward. 3 men entered, dressed in black tactical gear. The leader smiled, his teeth white against dark skin. He spoke Yoruba with a Lagos accent. "Miss Okoye, you have been difficult to find, but the Black Orchid is distracted. He is tearing apart the city looking for you. He has made mistakes, left openings." Amara backed against the wall. "What do you want?" "We want him to suffer," the man said, raising his weapon. "And you're going to help us." The window shattered. A figure swung through the glass on a rappelling line, moving with impossible speed and grace. Jae-hyun. He had discarded his suit for black combat gear. The orchid tattoo was visible on his neck, stark against skin sheen with rain. He fired before his feet touched the ground. 2 shots. 2 men down. The leader spun, firing wildly. Jae-hyun moved like smoke, dodging the bullets, closing the distance. He disarmed the man with brutal efficiency, breaking his arm with a sickening crack, then driving his knee into the attacker's sternum. The man crumpled. Jae-hyun stood over him, his chest heaving, his weapon pressed against the man's forehead. "You touched what is mine," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You entered her space. You breathed her air." "Jae-hyun, no," Amara whispered. He did not pull the trigger. Instead, he struck the man with the butt of his gun, knocking him unconscious. Then he turned to her. His eyes were wild. He crossed the room in 2 strides and crushed her against him, his grip so tight she could barely breathe. "You left," he growled into her hair. "You walked into the open. Do you know what I imagined? Do you know what I saw in my mind?" "I was protecting you," she sobbed against his chest. "And I am protecting you," he snapped, pulling back to grip her shoulders. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. He had not slept in 72 hours. "I have burned half of Seoul to find you. I have destroyed 3 syndicate safe houses. I have declared war on every faction that ever looked at me sideways. There is no protection that does not include me. Amara, none." He kissed her then. It was not gentle. It was desperation and fury, and 20 years of starvation finally fed. His hands tangled in her hair, his mouth claiming hers with possessiveness that made her dizzy. The orchid tattoo on his wrist brushed her cheek, a brand of ownership she no longer wanted to resist. "Take me home," she breathed against his lips. The penthouse was quiet. The staff had been dismissed. Hannah was safe in a secure location, protected by Jae-hyun's most loyal guards. Amara stood in the center of the master suite, her clothes soaked from the rain, her body trembling. Jae-hyun watched her from the doorway, his jacket discarded, his shirt unbuttoned to reveal the full expanse of the tattoo across his chest. The black orchid seemed to breathe with his heartbeat. "I am done running," Amara said, "and I am done being your secret, or your witness, or your liability." "Then what are you?" he asked, his voice rough. "I am your equal," she said, stepping toward him. "I am the woman who sees you, not the billionaire, not the black orchid. The man who wakes at 3 a.m. to check on his daughter. The man who keeps my favorite tea in the kitchen, even though he hates the smell. The man who is terrified of being loved." Jae-hyun closed his eyes. A tear escaped, tracking down his cheek. "I do not know how to do this gently." "Then be rough," she whispered, reaching up to undo the remaining buttons of his shirt. "Be real. Be here." He caught her wrists, his eyes snapping open, dark and hungry. "If I start, I will not stop. If I have you, I will keep you. Forever. In every way. There will be no leaving again. No protection that separates us. You will be mine in the eyes of the law, the syndicate, and God. Say you understand." "I understand," she said, pressing her body against his. "I choose you, the monster and the man." He lifted her then, his hand spanning her waist with reverent strength. He carried her to the bed, the rain drumming against the windows, the city lights painting them in gold and shadow. What happened next was not gentle. It was two broken people finding their rhythm, their healing, their home. When the storm outside finally broke, they were intertwined, skin to skin, breath to breath, the orchid tattoo pressed against her heart. Later that night, as Amara slept, Jae-hyun stood on the balcony, his phone pressed to his ear. "Clear the calendar," he said to his chief of staff, "and contact the press. Tomorrow I make an announcement." The next morning, the Grand Hyatt Ballroom was packed with journalists from Seoul, Lagos, London, and New York. Rumors had swirled for weeks about the Black Orchid's violent rampage across the city. They expected a statement about war, about blood. Instead, they saw love. Jae-hyun walked onto the stage in a crisp white suit, the orchid tattoo on his wrist visible as he adjusted the microphone. Beside him stood Amara, wearing a dress of midnight blue that honored her Nigerian heritage, her head held high, her hand clasped firmly in his. "I have spent my life in shadows," Jae-hyun began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I believe that power was control. That love was weakness. I was wrong." He turned to Amara, his eyes softening in a way that made the cameras flash wildly. "This woman entered my world when I was a ghost. She spoke to my daughter when everyone else rendered her invisible. She saw my violence and did not flinch. She saw my wounds and did not run." He knelt. The crowd gasped. "Amara Okoye," he said, loud and clear, devoid of shame or hesitation. "You are the only truth I have ever known. Marry me, not as my witness, not as my protection, as my partner, as my queen, as the only woman who has ever owned me, heart and soul." Amara looked down at him, this powerful, broken, beautiful man, kneeling before the world. She saw the headlines they would write. The shock, the mockery turned to envy. She did not care. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I will marry you, Jae-hyun Adeyemi. Not because you are a billionaire, but because you see me." He slid a ring onto her finger, a black diamond, cut in the shape of an orchid, surrounded by sapphires the color of the Lagos Sea. Then he stood and kissed her, his hands framing her face, his body shielding her from the flashing cameras in a gesture that was both tender and possessive. The headline the next day read, "The Black Orchid Blooms. Billionaire chooses love over empire." 6 months later, the war was over. The Ondo Syndicate had been dismantled, its leaders imprisoned or exiled. Jae-hyun had voluntarily dissolved his own underground operations, transferring his legitimate billions into charitable foundations across Korea and Nigeria. He had kept his promise. He had chosen love over power. The wedding was held on a private beach in Lagos, where the Atlantic met the sand in endless devotion. Hannah stood as maid of honor, signing her vows to Amara with tearful joy. Jae-hyun wore traditional Nigerian agbada mixed with Korean minimalist tailoring, the orchid tattoo visible at his collar, no longer a symbol of fear, but of survival. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, Jae-hyun lifted Amara into his arms. She was radiant, her curves embraced by silk and gold, her belly rounded with the child they had created in that night of storm and surrender. "You have given me a family," he whispered against her ear, his hand resting possessively on her womb. "You have given me peace." "You gave yourself permission to receive it," she replied, threading her fingers through his hair. "I just held the door open." He kissed her then, slow and deep, as the waves crashed their eternal rhythm behind them. The photographers captured the moment. The image would grace magazines worldwide. A plus-size black woman, crowned in flowers, held by a Korean-Nigerian billionaire who looked at her like she was a source of gravity itself. Later, in their villa, as Hannah practiced her cello in the garden and the baby kicked softly against Amara's palm, Jae-hyun traced the lines of the orchid tattoo on his chest. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "The danger? The chaos?" Amara smiled, taking his hand and placing it over her heart. "I regret nothing. You did not choose me despite the chaos, Jae-hyun. You chose me because I was strong enough to survive it. And I chose you because I saw the man beneath the monster." "And what do you see now?" he asked. "I see my husband," she said. "My home. My forever." Outside, the Lagos night bloomed with stars. Inside, two hearts beat in sync, having conquered fear, trauma, power, and isolation. The story that began with mockery had ended in majesty. The black orchid had found his son.